An original story, narrated exclusively for Love Written in Silence. The Duke of Blackmoor stands alone by the frost-covered windows of Ravenswood House, his fingers tracing the edge of a locket containing a portrait he hasn't looked at in years. Miss Charlotte Winters adjusts her simple dress backstage, taking deep breaths as she prepares to perform for nobility she never wished to impress. Their eyes meet across the crowded ballroom as the first notes of her song pierce the aristocratic chatter, and something in his rigid posture softens imperceptibly. Charlotte's voice falters for just a moment when she notices his intense gaze, but she continues, unaware that the melody she chose was the very one that haunted the Duke's memories of betrayal for a decade. Rain begins to patter against the grand windows as the candlelight flickers, casting shadows across faces that will soon be irrevocably changed by what begins this night. Alaric Ravenswood, the Duke of Blackmoor, stood at the edge of his own ballroom, watching the spectacle unfold with detached interest. The chandeliers cast prismatic light across the sea of silk, jewels, and carefully arranged smiles. 10 years as London's most eligible widower had taught him the choreography of these events, the calculated approaches, the mothers with eligible daughters, the subtle inquiries about his prolonged mourning. "Your Grace," his steward murmured, appearing at his elbow with practiced discretion. "The musicians have arrived. The vocalist, Miss Winters, is among them." Alaric nodded without turning. "Ensure she has everything required. I'm told her reputation is excellent. Indeed, Your Grace. Though she rarely performs at private gatherings, then we are fortunate." The conversation ended with the finality only a duke could command. The annual charity ball at Ravenswood House had become a tradition, one that Alaric maintained with the same precision he applied to all his ducal duties. The proceeds would benefit the widows and orphans of soldiers, a cause close to what remained of his heart. It was also, though he would never acknowledge it publicly, a memorial to his late wife, Eleanor. The faithful Duke, they called him in hushed, reverent tones. London society had transformed his grief into something noble, romantic even. A man so devoted to his wife's memory that a decade had passed without him seeking another duchess. What they didn't understand, what he ensured they never would, was that his fidelity was not to love, but to its betrayal. Eleanor had been everything a duchess should be: beautiful, accomplished, graceful. Their marriage had been arranged, but not unwelcome. For 3 years, they had built what he believed was a partnership of mutual respect and growing affection, until the night he discovered the letters, until the morning she died in childbirth, taking with her a child that could not possibly have been his. The scandal had been contained, the truth known only to him and his most trusted servants. The child, stillborn, was buried with its mother, and Alaric had buried his trust alongside them. "Your Grace," Lady Harrington approached, her daughter in tow. "We were just remarking on how splendid the orchestra sounds this evening." "Thank you, Lady Harrington. I'm pleased you're enjoying yourself." His smile was practiced, perfect, and never reached his eyes. "My Georgiana has just completed her studies at the pianoforte. Perhaps she might play for you sometime." Alaric's gaze shifted briefly to the young woman, who blushed on cue. "How accomplished London's young ladies have become. You must be very proud." The conversation continued, a dance of words as precisely executed as the waltz beginning on the floor. He performed his role flawlessly, as always. It was nearing midnight when the regular orchestra paused, and the master of ceremonies announced a special performance. The crowd's attention shifted to the small stage at the far end of the ballroom, where a woman now stood beside the pianoforte. Miss Charlotte Winters was not what one would expect of a celebrated vocalist. There was nothing showy in her appearance. A simple dark blue gown, hair arranged modestly, minimal jewelry. She did not smile broadly or attempt to charm the audience with practiced gestures. Instead, she stood with quiet dignity, nodding to her accompanist. Alaric found himself watching her with unexpected interest. In a room where every person performed their social role with calculated precision, her stillness was almost disconcerting. And then she began to sing. The first notes floated across the ballroom, silencing conversation as effectively as a ducal command. Her voice was clear, controlled, but with an emotional depth that belied her composed exterior. She sang of loss, of memory, of the weight of absence, a folk ballad transformed into something both ancient and immediate. Alaric felt a strange tightness in his chest. For 10 years, he had maintained perfect control over his emotions, never allowing himself to feel the full measure of his grief or rage. Yet this woman's voice seemed to bypass all his carefully constructed defenses. As the final notes faded, the ballroom remained silent for a heartbeat before erupting in appreciative applause. Miss Winters acknowledged it with a simple curtsy, no more effusive in accepting praise than she had been in her performance. "Remarkable, isn't she?" Lord Pembroke commented, appearing at Alaric's side. "They say she teaches music to support herself." Turned down multiple offers of patronage that might have compromised her independence. Indeed, Alaric's voice betrayed nothing of his inner turmoil. A woman of principle, it seems. Rare enough these days. As Miss Winters left the stage, her eyes briefly met Alaric's across the room. There was no coquetry in her glance, no invitation or recognition of his status, only a moment of human acknowledgement before she looked away. For the first time in years, Alaric Ravenswood felt something stir within him that was neither duty nor remembered pain. It was curiosity, perhaps, or recognition of something familiar in a stranger. Whatever it was, it disturbed the perfect solitude he had built around himself, and that, he decided as he turned away, was something he could not afford. Charlotte Winters gathered her music sheets with practiced efficiency as the other musicians prepared to leave. The performance had gone well, better than expected, given her initial reluctance to accept the engagement. "Miss Winters." The Duke's steward appeared beside her, his manner formal, but not unkind. "His Grace wishes to express his appreciation for your performance this evening." Charlotte nodded, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "Please convey my thanks to the Duke for the opportunity. Actually, His Grace would like to express his appreciation personally, if you would be so kind as to follow me." Surprise flickered across her features before she composed herself. Of course, as she followed the steward through corridors, lined with ancestral portraits, Charlotte reminded herself that this was merely a professional courtesy. At 32, she had long since learned to navigate the sometimes treacherous waters of performing in noble houses. Her reputation as a music teacher and vocalist rested on both her talent and her unimpeachable conduct. The steward led her to a room that was clearly the heart of someone's private world. Books lined the walls, a pianoforte stood in one corner, and a large desk occupied the space near the windows. It was here that the Duke of Blackmoor stood waiting, his tall figure silhouetted against the night sky, visible through the glass. "Miss Charlotte Winters, Your Grace," the steward announced before withdrawing. The Duke turned, and Charlotte was struck by the contrast between the man before her and the distant figure she had observed earlier. Up close, his features were sharper, more defined by whatever thoughts moved behind his composed expression. "Miss Winters, thank you for indulging my request at this late hour." "It's no indulgence, Your Grace. I am in your employ this evening." A faint smile touched his lips. Directness. How refreshing. He gestured to a chair. "Please." Charlotte sat, arranging her skirts with the economy of movement that characterized everything she did. Was the performance satisfactory? More than satisfactory, it was. He paused, seemingly searching for the right word. Truthful. Truthful. The word surprised her. Yes, in a world of artifice, truth becomes the rarest commodity. He moved to the pianoforte, running his fingers lightly over the keys, without pressing them. "The ballad you chose, it's not commonly performed in such settings." "No. I was told the evening's purpose was to benefit widows and orphans. It seemed appropriate to honor the reality of loss, rather than merely entertain." He looked at her with new interest. "You speak from experience." It wasn't a question, but Charlotte answered anyway. "My father was a clergyman in Northumberland. When he died, music became both my solace and my livelihood. And your mother passed when I was young. I was fortunate to have a father who believed daughters deserved education as much as sons." Alaric nodded, studying her with an intensity that might have made Charlotte uncomfortable had it felt personal, rather than contemplative. "You teach, I understand." "Yes, primarily young ladies, though I have several male students as well. And I copy music for publishers when commissions are available." A life built on your own terms, within the constraints society allows a woman of my station. Yes, the Duke moved away from the pianoforte, his expression unreadable. The song you performed, I haven't heard it in many years. Something in his tone made Charlotte look more closely at him. It's an old ballad about enduring love and memory. Some find it melancholy, but I've always thought it hopeful in its way. Hopeful? There was genuine curiosity in his voice. It speaks of carrying someone within your heart, even after they're gone. Not as a burden, but as a gift. Charlotte stopped, suddenly aware she might be speaking too freely. Forgive me. I sometimes forget myself when discussing music. No apology needed. It's illuminating to hear another perspective. He turned back to the window, his profile sharp against the darkness. My late wife enjoyed music. The statement hung in the air, simple yet weighted with unspoken meaning. I'm sorry for your loss, Charlotte said quietly. It was many years ago. Time changes grief, but doesn't erase it. At least, that has been my experience. The Duke turned to look at her, something shifting in his expression. You speak with remarkable candor, Miss Winters. A habit my more fashionable students often find disconcerting, she admitted with a small smile. I find it refreshing. He moved toward his desk, picking up a small leather-bound book. I have a proposition, if you're amenable. The Ravenswood Foundation sponsors several charitable concerts throughout the season. We are in need of someone to oversee the musical arrangements and possibly perform. Charlotte's surprise must have shown on her face. It would be a paid position, of course, he continued, and would not interfere with your teaching commitments. May I ask why me, Your Grace? Surely there are more established musicians in London. Because you understand the purpose of such events goes beyond entertainment. Because your performance tonight spoke to something true. He paused. And because I suspect you would tell me directly if you thought a piece inappropriate, rather than simply acquiesce to ducal whims. Despite herself, Charlotte smiled. On that you may depend. For the first time that evening, something like genuine amusement warmed the Duke's eyes. Then we understand each other, Miss Winters. As Charlotte left Ravenswood House that night, she couldn't help but feel that something unexpected had begun, a conversation that somehow neither of them had finished. The tempo should be slightly slower here, Charlotte said, pointing to the sheet music spread before them. It allows the listener to feel the weight of the words. Alaric studied the notation, his fingers absently tracing the measures. Like this, he played the passage on the pianoforte, his technique precise, if somewhat mechanical. Yes, though perhaps with more. She hesitated, searching for a word that wouldn't offend ducal pride. Feeling, he supplied, a faint smile touching his lips. Exactly. Charlotte returned his smile, their third meeting having eased some of the formality between them. Music is mathematics made emotional. The notes are correct, but they must breathe. A concept my tutors attempted to instill, with limited success. He played the passage again, this time with more sensitivity. Much better, Your Grace. They sat in the music room of Ravenswood House, ostensibly reviewing selections for the upcoming charity concert. 3 weeks had passed since the ball, and what had begun as a professional arrangement had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a space where titles and stations seemed to matter less than the exchange of thoughts. I've been meaning to ask, Alaric said, closing the music book, why you accepted my offer. Lord Pembroke mentioned you've declined similar positions. Charlotte considered her answer carefully. Those offers came with expectations beyond music. Yours did not. And yet society whispers nonetheless. Society always whispers, Your Grace. I've learned to distinguish between whispers that matter and those that don't. And which category do the current whispers fall into? That depends on what they're saying. Her directness, as always, caught him off guard. That the Duke of Blackmoor has developed an interest in music that extends beyond patronage. His voice was neutral, but his eyes watched her reaction closely. Then they are whispers that matter only if they trouble you. Charlotte met his gaze steadily. Do they? Alaric stood, moving to the window that overlooked the garden. Spring was beginning to touch the grounds with tentative color. I have lived with society's observations for a decade. Their approval or disapproval concerns me less than it once did. And yet you maintain the image of the faithful Duke with considerable care. He turned, surprise evident in his expression. You've heard that ridiculous title. It would be difficult not to. It's spoken with great reverence in certain circles. And what do you make of it? Charlotte hesitated, aware she was treading on personal ground. I think titles bestowed by others rarely capture the complexity of the person who bears them. Alaric studied her for a long moment. You have a gift for saying much while revealing little, Miss Winters. A necessary skill for a woman who makes her living in genteel society without belonging to it. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. The steward entered, reminding Alaric of an appointment with his solicitor. As Charlotte gathered her things to leave, Alaric made an impulsive decision. My carriage can take you home, Miss Winters. The weather has turned. Indeed, rain had begun to fall, pattering against the windows with increasing intensity. That's very kind, but unnecessary. I'm accustomed to London weather. Nevertheless, I insist. Professional responsibility for my musical director's well-being. Charlotte acquiesced with a nod, knowing further protest would only draw attention to the gesture. In the carriage, they sat across from each other, the rhythm of the wheels and rain creating a cocoon of privacy, rarely afforded to people of their respective stations. The silence between them was comfortable until Charlotte spoke. May I ask you something, Your Grace? After weeks of musical instruction, I believe you've earned that right. Why did you really offer me this position? The truth, if you please. Alaric looked at her, his expression more open than she had yet seen it. Because when you sang that night, it was the first time in 10 years that I felt something other than duty or regret. The admission hung between them, more intimate than any physical gesture could have been. And that troubled you, she said softly. Yes, and intrigued me. He glanced out at the rain-slicked streets. You remind me of someone I used to be, before you became the faithful cook, before I learned that faith can be misplaced. The bitterness in his voice was so fleeting, she might have imagined it. The carriage slowed as they approached her modest home on a respectable, if unfashionable street. Before the footman could open the door, Charlotte turned to Alaric. We all build defenses against pain, Your Grace. Some choose isolation, others practicality. Neither is wrong, but neither is complete. And what would completeness look like, in your estimation? The courage to risk feeling again, knowing it might bring either joy or pain. Alaric's expression softened. You speak as someone who has faced that choice. Perhaps we all do, in different ways. She gathered her cloak around her as the footman opened the door. Thank you for the carriage, Your Grace. Alaric, he said suddenly. When we are alone like this, I would prefer you call me Alaric. Charlotte paused, understanding the significance of the request. Then you must call me Charlotte. Charlotte, he repeated, as if testing the sound of it. Until Thursday's rehearsal. Until Thursday. Alaric. As the carriage pulled away, Charlotte stood in the light rain for a moment, aware that something fundamental had shifted between them. A boundary had been crossed, one that could not be re-established without mutual pretense. Inside Ravenswood House that evening, Alaric sat alone in his study, a glass of brandy untouched beside him. For the first time in years, the portrait of Eleanor on his desk seemed less an accusation than a memory. And for the first time since her death, he allowed himself to wonder if loyalty to the past required the sacrifice of the present. Outside, the spring rain continued to fall, washing winter from the streets of London and bringing the promise of new growth to even the most carefully tended gardens. The discovery came by accident, as such revelations often do. Alaric had been searching for a particular musical score in the library when he found it, a small wooden box tucked behind volumes of poetry that Eleanor had favored. Inside lay a bundle of letters he had never seen, tied with a faded ribbon. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the first one, recognizing Eleanor's handwriting immediately. My dearest friend, I find myself unable to speak the words that crowd my heart, so I commit them to paper instead, though I know not if I'll find the courage to share them. The letter continued, expressing not romantic sentiments to a lover, as he had feared, but desperate confessions to a confidant, Eleanor's childhood friend, Lady Sophia Blackwood. As Alaric read through the letters, all unsent, all revealing Eleanor's growing unhappiness in their marriage, a different narrative emerged than the one he had constructed over a decade. I cannot tell him of my fears. He values strength above all things. and I find myself playing the role of the perfect duchess, while my heart withers. The child I carry should bring joy, yet I am terrified, not of motherhood, but of failing at it as thoroughly as I seem to have failed at being a wife worthy of his love, rather than merely his approval. Alaric sat motionless, the letters scattered around him like autumn leaves. The story they told contradicted everything he had believed about their marriage and Eleanor's supposed betrayal. The letters to her alleged lover, the ones that had destroyed his faith, suddenly seemed ambiguous in this new light. "Your Grace?" The steward's voice startled him. "Miss Winters has arrived for your meeting regarding the concert program." Alaric gathered the letters hastily. "Show her to the music room. I'll be there shortly." When he entered, Charlotte was seated at the pianoforte, playing a gentle melody he didn't recognize. She looked up at his approach, her smile fading as she noted his expression. "Is something wrong?" Alaric hesitated, then made a decision. "I found some letters that have unsettled me. Letters that suggest my understanding of past events may have been incomplete." Charlotte's hands stilled on the keys. "That sounds significant." "It is." He paced the length of the room. "For 10 years, I've believed a certain truth about my marriage, about my wife's loyalty. These letters suggest I may have misinterpreted everything. May I ask what they contain?" Eleanor's private thoughts, her unhappiness, her fear that I valued her only as the perfect duchess, not as the woman she was. He stopped, looking at Charlotte with something like bewilderment. How could I not have seen it? Sometimes we see only what confirms what we already believe. Charlotte's voice was gentle, or what protects us from painful truths, which is that relationships fail in both directions. That betrayal, if it occurred, might have had roots in loneliness or misunderstanding, not merely in character. Alaric sank into a chair, the weight of a decade's certainty suddenly lifted, leaving him unbalanced. "The night before she died," we argued, "I had found letters, different letters, that I believed proved her unfaithfulness. She tried to explain, but I refused to listen. The next morning, she was gone," Charlotte finished softly. "Yes, and I've spent 10 years being faithful to a memory built on anger and incomplete understanding." He looked up at her, his expression raw with realization. "What kind of loyalty is that?" Charlotte moved from the pianoforte to sit near him, close enough for comfort, but maintaining a proper distance, a human one. We all construct narratives that help us survive our pain, and if those narratives are false, then perhaps it's never too late to revise them. Their eyes met, and in that moment something passed between them that transcended the careful boundaries they had established. Alaric reached for her hand, an instinctive gesture of connection that Charlotte allowed, her fingers curling around his. "The song you sang that night at the ball," he said suddenly. "It was Eleanor's favorite." I recognized it immediately. Charlotte's expression registered surprise. "I didn't know. How could you have? But when you sang it, with such understanding of its meaning, it was as if..." He struggled to find the words. "As if something long frozen began to thaw," she supplied. "Yes." His grip on her hand tightened slightly. "Charlotte, I don't know what this is between us. I only know that when I'm with you, the past seems less absolute." The intimacy of the moment was broken by the sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway. They separated quickly, Charlotte returning to the pianoforte as Alaric composed himself. Lord Pembroke entered without ceremony, his expression darkening at the sight of Charlotte. "Ah, the musical consultation continues, I see." "Lord Pembroke," Alaric acknowledged coolly, "Miss Winters and I were discussing the program for next week's concert." "Indeed?" "The Ton is discussing it as well, though perhaps with different emphasis." Pembroke's gaze moved between them. "Your dedication to charitable causes is admirable, Blackmoor, but perhaps more discretion would be advisable." "I was not aware that music required discretion, Lord Pembroke." "Music, no. But frequent private meetings with an unmarried woman of modest background. Society draws its own conclusions." Charlotte stood, her posture straight and dignified. "If my presence is causing difficulties, perhaps I should withdraw from the project." "That won't be necessary," Alaric said firmly. "Lord Pembroke's concern, while noted, is misplaced." Pembroke raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" The faithful Duke suddenly developing an interest in a singer half his age. "People talk, Blackmoor. Let them. I've lived my life according to their expectations long enough. After Pembroke departed, a heavy silence fell between Alaric and Charlotte. "He's right about one thing," she said finally. "My continued involvement will damage your reputation. My reputation has been a prison of my own making. Perhaps it's time I reconsidered its value." Charlotte shook her head. "You speak from emotion, not reason. The discovery of those letters has unsettled you, understandably. But your position in society means nothing if it requires me to continue living a half-life." He moved toward her, stopping just short of taking her hands again. "Charlotte, for 10 years I've been faithful to a ghost and a misunderstanding. When I'm with you, I feel awake." The vulnerability in his expression both moved and frightened her. "Alaric, we must be careful, for both our sakes." "Yes," he agreed, stepping back slightly, "but not at the cost of truth. Not anymore." As Charlotte left Ravenswood House that day, she knew they stood at a precipice. The shadows of the past were lifting, but what light might reveal was yet uncertain, and potentially dangerous for them both. For 3 weeks, Charlotte heard nothing from Alaric. The charity concert proceeded without her involvement, her role quietly reassigned to a more socially acceptable musician. London society noted her absence with knowing whispers that reached even her modest circle of students and patrons. She told herself it was for the best. Whatever had begun between them could lead nowhere but to scandal for him and ruin for her. Yet in quiet moments, she found herself at her own small pianoforte, playing the melodies they had discussed, remembering the way his expression had softened when music bridged the silence between them. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, as Charlotte was concluding a lesson with the daughter of a prosperous merchant, an unexpected visitor arrived. "Mr. Thornfield, His Grace's steward, to see you, miss," her housekeeper announced, clearly flustered by the presence of such a distinguished caller. Charlotte dismissed her student with a reassuring smile before receiving the visitor in her small parlor. "Miss Winters." Thornfield bowed respectfully. "I hope I find you well." "Quite well, thank you." "What brings you here, Mr. Thornfield?" The steward hesitated, his usual composure wavering slightly. "A matter of some delicacy, miss, regarding His Grace." Charlotte's heart quickened despite herself. "Is he unwell? Not in body, perhaps, but in spirit?" Thornfield paused. "Forgive my presumption, but I have served the Duke since he was a boy. I have never seen him as he was during the weeks of your acquaintance, nor as he has been since its abrupt conclusion. Mr. Thornfield, whatever you believe existed between His Grace and myself was nothing improper, I'm certain," he interrupted gently. "But it was something necessary, I think, for him." Charlotte studied the older man's face, sensing there was more he wished to say. "Please speak plainly. His Grace has discovered certain truths about the late Duchess that have unsettled his understanding of the past." Thornfield reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper. This was among her personal effects. "I believe it may complete the picture." Charlotte accepted the paper with hesitation. "Should you be sharing this with me?" "Probably not," Thornfield admitted. "But I have watched His Grace entomb himself in grief and misunderstanding for a decade. When you entered his life, something changed. And now he has withdrawn again," Charlotte finished. "Yes, after reading this, you may decide it is none of your concern. That would be your right. But I thought you should have all the facts before making that decision." After the steward departed, Charlotte unfolded the paper with trembling hands. It contained a single verse, written in a delicate feminine hand. "Though death may part us, love remains, a bridge across the dark. Forgive me for the words unsaid, the truths I could not speak. Remember me not as perfect Grace, but as I truly was, a woman who loved imperfectly, yet loved you to the last." With sudden clarity, Charlotte recognized it as the final verse of the ballad she had sung at the ball, the verse she had omitted that night, finding it too intimate for a public performance. Eleanor had known the complete song, had perhaps even written this verse herself, as a final message never delivered. That evening, Charlotte made a decision. She wrote a brief note requesting a meeting at the Royal Academy of Music, where she occasionally assisted with instruction. A public place, but one where private conversation might be possible. 2 days later, she waited in a small practice room, the note Eleanor had written placed carefully on the pianoforte. When Alaric entered, she was struck by the changes 3 weeks had wrought. He looked tired, the careful composure of his public persona, showing signs of strain. Charlotte. Her name on his lips carried a weight of unspoken emotion. Thank you for coming. She gestured to the bench beside her. Please. He sat, maintaining a proper distance between them. Your note mentioned something important to discuss. Yes. She indicated the paper on the pianoforte. Mr. Thornfield brought this to me. I believe it was written by Eleanor. Alaric's hand shook slightly as he took the paper, his expression changing as he read the verse. This is the ending of the ballad you sang. Yes, the verse I didn't perform that night. She knew this song. It was. He stopped, emotion threatening to overwhelm his control. It was her way of speaking to you, perhaps, of saying what she couldn't in life. Alaric read the verse again, his voice barely audible. Remember me not as perfect grace, but as I truly was. She knew then. She knew I never saw her completely. Or perhaps she never allowed herself to be fully seen. Charlotte suggested gently. Relationships fail in both directions, remember? He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time since entering. I've missed you, Charlotte. These weeks without our conversations have been empty. I've missed you as well. The admission cost her something in pride, but truth demanded it. But you were right to create distance. The rumors were becoming difficult. I didn't withdraw for the rumors, Alaric. I withdrew because I saw something in your eyes that frightened me. What? Hope, possibility, things I have no right to inspire in a duke. Alaric's expression softened. And if the duke wishes to determine his own rights, then he risks more than he knows. Charlotte stood, needing physical distance to maintain emotional clarity. Your position, your reputation, mean nothing compared to this awakening. He rose as well, maintaining the space between them. Charlotte, I don't know what path forward looks like. I only know that without you, there seems to be no path at all. The raw honesty in his voice nearly undid her resolve. We need time, Alaric. Time to be certain this isn't merely the result of discovering Eleanor's truth. He nodded slowly. Time then. But not separation. Not again. As they parted that day, no promises were made, no declarations offered. But something had shifted, a truth acknowledged between them that could no longer be denied, whatever consequences might follow. The Royal Theatre glowed with candlelight, its red velvet seats filled with London's elite, for the season's most anticipated concert. Charlotte stood backstage, adjusting her simple pearl earrings, a gift from her father years ago, and her only concession to adornment for the evening's performance. 5 minutes, Miss Winters, the stage manager informed her, with a respectful nod. This night marked her first public performance since withdrawing from the Ravenswood Foundation concerts. The invitation had come from the Duchess of Harrington, a genuine lover of music whose patronage could ensure Charlotte's professional standing regardless of any lingering gossip. As she reviewed her program one last time, Charlotte could not help but scan the audience visible through a gap in the curtains. The ducal box remained conspicuously empty, though she had sent Alaric a personal invitation. Their meetings over the past month had been careful, proper conversations in public gardens, chaperoned musical discussions at the homes of mutual acquaintances, a slow rebuilding of connection under society's watchful eye. The orchestra began the introduction to her first piece. Charlotte stepped onto the stage, the familiar calm of performance settling over her as she curtsied to the audience. From the corner of her eye, she noticed movement in the ducal box, but forced herself not to look directly at it. Focus was essential now. She began with a traditional aria, her voice filling the theater with practiced precision. As she moved through her program, she allowed herself to become lost in the music, each piece chosen to showcase not just technical skill, but emotional depth. The audience responded with increasing warmth, their initial polite attention transforming into genuine appreciation. For her final selection, Charlotte had chosen the ballad she had performed at Ravenswood House, the complete version, including Eleanor's verse. As the pianist played the opening notes, she finally permitted herself to glance at the ducal box. It was empty. A sharp pang of disappointment threatened her composure, but years of professional discipline allowed her to begin the song without faltering. She sang of love and memory, of imperfect connections and enduring bonds, her voice carrying the emotion of the lyrics with understated power. As she approached the final verse, Eleanor's verse, Charlotte's gaze swept across the audience. And there, in the last row of the orchestra section, sat Alaric. Not in the elevated ducal box that separated him from common theatergoers, but among them, his attention fixed solely on her. Their eyes met as she sang the words that Eleanor had written, words of imperfect love and final forgiveness. Something passed between them in that moment, an understanding that transcended the public setting and the careful distance they had maintained. The applause when she finished was immediate and enthusiastic. Charlotte curtsied, accepting the acclaim with genuine gratitude before leaving the stage. As the audience began to disperse, she changed quickly from her performance gown into a simpler evening dress, instructing her maid to take the gown home while she remained to speak with patrons. One by one, the theater emptied. Charlotte accepted congratulations from the Duchess of Harrington and several other influential music lovers, discussing potential engagements with practiced poise, while her awareness remained fixed on the question of whether Alaric had stayed. Finally, only the theater staff remained, extinguishing candles and tidying the space. Charlotte stood center stage, looking out at the now empty seats, allowing herself a moment of quiet satisfaction at the evening's success. "You sang it beautifully." Alaric's voice came from the shadows at the side of the stage. He stepped forward, no longer the formal duke of public occasions, but the man she had come to know in their private conversations. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "I wasn't certain you would. Neither was I, until the last moment." He moved closer, stopping at a respectful distance. The final verse, it was perfect. It was Eleanor's truth. It deserved to be heard. Yes. He glanced around the empty theater. "I sat among the general audience tonight. I noticed. It felt right somehow, to experience your voice as others do, without the separation of rank." Charlotte studied him, noting the relaxed set of his shoulders, the openness in his expression that had once been so rare. "And how was the experience?" "Illuminating." He smiled slightly. "Though I suspect Lord Pembroke nearly expired from shock when he saw me." Despite herself, Charlotte laughed. "I can imagine." The ease between them felt both familiar and new, the comfort of established connection combined with the awareness that something fundamental had changed. "I've been thinking," Alaric said after a moment, "about what you said regarding time and certainty. And I believe I've had enough of both." He moved closer, close enough that she could see the determination in his eyes. "Charlotte, I know what society expects. I know what maintaining my position and reputation would require. And I find I no longer care." Her heart quickened, but caution made her respond carefully. "Alaric, your standing is meaningless if it requires me to deny what I've discovered these past months." He took her hands in his, a public gesture that would have caused scandal had anyone remained to witness it. "When Eleanor died, I built a shrine to a memory I didn't fully understand. I called it loyalty, but it was really fear of living fully, of risking pain again." Charlotte's voice was barely above a whisper. "And now I understand that true loyalty to Eleanor's memory means honoring what she tried to tell me, that love, even imperfect love, is worth the risk." His grip on her hands tightened. "I don't want to spend another decade living half a life, Charlotte." "What are you saying?" "That I love you, that I want a future with you, whatever society might think of it." The words hung between them, both terrifying and exhilarating in their simplicity. "Alaric, Charlotte hesitated. The practical concerns she had lived with all her adult life, warring with the emotion his declaration evoked. "I've spent my life building independence. Becoming your Duchess would mean surrendering that in many ways. Not if we don't allow it." His expression was earnest. "I don't want you to become what Eleanor felt forced to be, a perfect Duchess rather than the woman I love. Whatever arrangement would preserve what matters to you, we will find it." Charlotte searched his face, finding only sincerity. "It won't be easy. Society will talk. Let them. We've both lived too long concerned with others' expectations." Slowly, deliberately, Charlotte raised her hand to his face, the first truly intimate gesture she had permitted herself. "Then yes, Alaric. Yes to whatever future we create together." He drew her closer, his kiss both gentle and certain, a promise rather than a demand. Around them, the empty theater stood witness, its shadows and silence offering a rare moment of privacy, in which two people, long accustomed to solitude, chose connection instead. The wedding took place at Ravenswood's country estate, as summer gave way to autumn. No grand London ceremony, no parade of nobility or elaborate celebrations, just a simple service in the estate chapel, attended by those few whose opinions truly mattered. Charlotte wore a gown of pale blue, rather than traditional white, her only adornment, a circlet of late-blooming flowers from the estate gardens. Alaric waited for her at the altar, not in formal ducal regalia, but in the more understated attire of a country gentleman. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with a depth of meaning that moved even the most reserved guests. This was not a union of convenience or social advancement, but a choice made with clear eyes and full hearts. Afterward, as golden afternoon light streamed through the windows of the great hall, Charlotte played the pianoforte, while Alaric stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. The music, Eleanor's ballad, now familiar to all who knew their story, filled the space with its message of imperfect love and lasting memory. On the mantelpiece, a small portrait of Eleanor had been placed alongside photographs of Charlotte's parents and Alaric's family, not hidden away as a secret shame or displayed as a saint's icon, but acknowledged as part of the tapestry of experiences that had led them to each other. London society eventually adjusted to the Duke's unexpected choice, as it always does when change comes from those powerful enough to weather initial disapproval. Charlotte continued to teach and perform, establishing a music school for talented children, regardless of their background. Alaric supported her endeavors, while finding his own renewed purpose in agricultural improvements and educational initiatives on his estates. Their life together was not without challenges. There were moments when the weight of tradition pressed heavily, when the whispers grew loud enough to hear, when the ghosts of the past seemed to linger in shadowed corners. But in the music room of Ravenswood House, where their story had truly begun, harmony prevailed. Two people who had learned to protect themselves from life's uncertainties had found in each other the courage to embrace them instead, and discovered that love, like music, is most beautiful when it acknowledges both discord and resolution.